The snow fell in sheets across the Montana landscape. Each flake carried winter's fury, settling on the corrugated metal roof of the forward operating base like nature's own camouflage. Inside, the air hung thick with gun oil, stale coffee, and that particular tension unique to warriors preparing for violence. The temporary command post sat 40 miles from the Canadian border, close enough to feel the weight of international complications, far enough to maintain plausible deniability. This was the kind of place that didn't exist on any official map, the kind of base that would be denied by every government official who knew exactly where it was. Colonel Marcus Kane stood at the operations table, his weathered hands pressed against a satellite map he'd memorized hours ago. At 60, his hair had gone the color of steel wool, and the lines around his eyes told stories that would fill volumes. Panama in '89, Desert Storm. 2 decades of watching young warriors become legends or become statistics. Those eyes, pale gray, like a winter sky, had seen things that would break lesser men. They'd also seen Thomas Mercer take 3 bullets meant for him in the chaos of Panama City 35 years ago, when both men were young enough to believe they were immortal. The debt of a life saved never expires. Kane had learned that lesson the hard way. The door swung open, bringing with it a blast of January cold and a figure that made every man in the room look up from their work. She was small. That was the first thing Sergeant Cole Hartley noticed as he glanced over from the weapons rack. 5'3", maybe 5'4", in boots. The parka swallowed her frame, military green against the gray afternoon light filtering through frost-covered windows. When she pulled back her hood, auburn hair tumbled out. Cut regulation short, but still unmistakably feminine. Her face belonged in a magazine, not a forward combat position. High cheekbones, full lips, skin that seemed too soft for this hard world. She couldn't have been more than mid-20s. Hartley elbowed Corporal Finn Caldwell. "You seeing this?" Caldwell at 29 had learned to keep his mouth shut and his eyes open. He watched the new arrival sign paperwork at the duty desk. Her movements were precise, controlled. Something about the way she held herself didn't match the recruitment poster looks. There was steel beneath that porcelain exterior. "Transfer papers for Lieutenant Elena Mercer." The duty officer announced it loud enough for the room to hear, his voice carrying a note of barely concealed amusement. "Assignment to Special Operations Task Force 7, effective immediately." Kane's head came up slowly. The name hit him like a punch to the solar plexus. 35 years of memory flooded back in a single heartbeat. Mercer, the same name as the man who'd saved his life. The man who'd taught him what it truly meant to be a SEAL before that term became something civilians threw around at cocktail parties. But Thomas Mercer had been laid to rest 3 years ago. Another flag-draped coffin, another hero the country would forget by the next news cycle, another name on a wall that most Americans would never visit. The lieutenant approached the operations table. Up close, Kane could see her eyes were green, the color of sea glass polished by decades of ocean waves. They held a steadiness that made her look older than her years, a depth that spoke of things seen and survived. "Commander Kane," her voice was quiet but clear, the kind of voice that didn't need volume to carry authority. "Lieutenant Elena Mercer, reporting for duty." The room had gone silent. In that silence, Kane heard ghosts. "Mercer." The name felt strange on his tongue, like tasting something from a half-remembered dream. "Any relation to Master Chief Thomas Mercer?" "He was my father, sir." The words dropped into the quiet like stones into still water. Kane felt something twist in his chest. Old guilt mixed with older grief. Thomas Mercer's daughter. The last time he'd seen her, she'd been a kid at a funeral, holding a folded flag like it could somehow bring her father back from the dead. "I see." Kane's voice came out rougher than he intended. "Welcome to Frost Point, Lieutenant. We run a tight operation here. I trust your administrative skills are up to par." He saw it then, just a flicker across her face. Not anger, not disappointment, something colder. Calculation. "Yes, sir. Whatever you need, sir." Hartley couldn't contain himself. The words came out before his brain could stop them. "Hey, LT, you ever fired a weapon before, or are we starting from scratch here?" The question came with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. The kind of smile that said volumes about what he thought of diversity initiatives infecting the military. He'd seen too many politicians' pet projects get good men killed. Elena turned to look at him. The movement was fluid, controlled. For just a second, Hartley felt like he was being assessed by something predatory, like a deer suddenly realizing the shadow in the tall grass had eyes. "I've fired a few, Sergeant." "Good, good." Kane's voice had taken on the tone of a man delegating tasks he considered beneath his attention. "Because your first assignment is going to be maintenance. We've got 20 M4A1s that need detail cleaning, 6 M249 SAWs with carbon buildup that would make a drill instructor weep, and 3 Barrett M82A1s that have been sitting in storage since the last administration." He let the weight of that sink in. 48 hours of work compressed into 14 hours. For someone unfamiliar with the weapons, it would be impossible. For someone who'd never done it before, it would be a very public failure. "I want them combat ready by 0600 tomorrow." "Understood, sir." "The armory is through that door. Master Chief Sullivan will show you where we keep the cleaning supplies." Kane turned back to his maps, dismissing her with a gesture. "Welcome to the team, Lieutenant." As she walked toward the armory, Hartley leaned over to Caldwell. $20 says she's crying in an hour. 40 says she quits by midnight." Caldwell watched her disappear through the doorway. He noted the way she moved, the straightness of her spine, the complete absence of hesitation in her step. Something wasn't adding up. "I'll take that bet." The armory smelled of metal and preservative oil, a scent Elena had known since childhood, as familiar as her mother's perfume or the coffee her father brewed every Sunday morning. The weapons hung in their racks like sleeping predators, each one a tool she knew as intimately as her own hands. She ran her fingers along a Barrett M82A1, 50 caliber, 10 rounds of semi-automatic devastation, capable of punching through engine blocks at 1,000 yards. Her father had taught her to shoot one when she was 16 in the desert outside 29 Palms. The recoil had bruised her shoulder for a week, but she'd hit the target every single time. "You know what separates a good shot from a great one, little warrior?" His voice echoed in her memory, warm and rough like sandpaper wrapped in velvet. "It's not strength, it's not speed. It's knowing who you are when everything else falls away." Master Chief Frank Sullivan found her there 10 minutes later. At 64, he moved with the careful precision of a man whose knees remembered too many hard landings, whose back carried the memory of too much gear over too many miles. His face was creased leather, his eyes the faded blue of old denim. Time had weathered him like a rock formation, wearing away the soft parts until only the essential remained. He stopped in the doorway. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "Little warrior." His voice cracked on the words. Elena turned, and Sullivan saw Thomas Mercer's daughter grown into something her father would have recognized instantly. Not the child at the funeral anymore. Not the teenager who'd cried into his shoulder when they lowered the casket. This was the woman Thomas had hoped she'd become. "Uncle Frank." She closed the distance between them, and when he hugged her, he felt how small she was, how deceptively fragile. But he also felt the coiled strength in her frame, the muscle earned through pain and repetition, and the kind of dedication that most people couldn't even imagine. "Your father told me you made it through BUD/S." Sullivan's voice was thick when they separated. "Class 358, Hell Week in November. Said you never quit, not even when they had you in the surf zone for 6 hours straight." "He taught me well." "He did." Sullivan glanced back toward the command post, his expression troubled. "Does Kane know about what you really are?" "No, my records are classified. DevGru operations mostly. Syria, Iraq, some Afghanistan work before the withdrawal." She paused, and something hard flickered in those sea glass eyes. "They transferred me here under administrative cover." Sullivan's eyes narrowed. "Wait, no. Because someone needs to know the truth about August 2021, Uncle Frank, about what really happened in Kabul." The weight of those words settled between them like a physical thing. Sullivan had been at Thomas Mercer's funeral, had helped carry the casket, had heard the official report about tactical errors and bad intelligence. He'd also heard Thomas's voice on a scratchy satellite phone call 2 days before that final mission, words that had haunted him for 3 years. Someone sold us out, Frank. I don't know who yet, but someone on our side is dirty. Your father suspected, Sullivan said carefully. My father knew. Elena's voice didn't waver, but Sullivan heard the razor edge beneath it, and it got him killed. Before Sullivan could respond, the armory door opened again. Kane stepped through, followed by Hartley and Caldwell. Behind them, 2 more team members filed in. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, 34, with the build of a college linebacker gone to professional soldier. Staff Sergeant Victor Brennan, 41, whose scarred knuckles and cauliflower ears spoke to a youth spent in boxing rings before he found purpose in the military. Master Chief, I need you at the briefing. Kane's tone was all business. Lieutenant Mercer has her assignment. Let's leave her to it. Sullivan caught Elena's eye, a question and a warning in his gaze. She gave him the slightest nod. Not yet, not until the time was right. The men filed out, leaving Elena alone with 3 tons of weapons and 14 hours to prove something she shouldn't have had to prove. She started with the Barrett M82A1S. They were the most complex, and she wanted to be fresh for the detail work. The first rifle came out of its case with the familiar weight of serious engineering. 32 pounds of precision machinery designed to reach out and touch someone at distances most people couldn't even see. She cleared it by muscle memory. Magazine out, chamber check, safety verify. The movements were automatic, encoded in her nervous system through thousands of repetitions. Then she began the disassembly. 43 seconds later, the Barrett lay in its component parts on the cleaning mat, each piece positioned with the precision of a surgeon's instruments. Upper receiver, bolt assembly, barrel, lower receiver, recoil spring, firing pin. Her hands moved with the confidence of a master craftsman, every motion deliberate, every placement exact. This was meditation for her, the same piece her father had described when he first put a rifle in her hands. Shooting is like prayer, little warrior. Everything else falls a windmere until it's just you and the target and the space between. She was working on the second Barrett when Hartley poked his head back into the armory. 45 minutes had passed since they'd left her alone. He'd come to check on her progress. Maybe to offer some condescending advice, possibly to catch her struggling so he could report back to the others. Military hazing had a long and storied tradition, and pretty girls with famous fathers made excellent targets. What he saw made him freeze in the doorway. Elena had her sleeves rolled up to her elbows, her hands black with carbon and oil. 3 M4A1s lay completely disassembled on separate mats, their components gleaming from recent cleaning. The first Barrett was already reassembled and sitting in its case, ready for combat. She was working on the bolt assembly of the second, her movements quick and sure. A professional at the top of her craft. But it wasn't her efficiency that made Hartley's breath catch in his throat. It was her left forearm. The tattoo started just above her wrist and curved around her arm like a brand. The eagle, anchor, and trident of the Navy SEAL insignia, rendered in black ink with the kind of detail that spoke to expensive work and serious commitment. The kind of tattoo you earn, not bought. Below it, smaller but unmistakable, 4 letters that changed everything. DEVGRU, SEAL Team 6. The pieces clicked into place in Hartley's mind with the slow horror of dawning understanding. DevGru didn't take administrative transfers. DevGru didn't do diversity hiring. DevGru was where you went if you were the absolute best of the best. If you'd proven yourself beyond any shadow of doubt. If you'd earned the right to wear that insignia through blood and pain and the kind of suffering that broke most people who attempted it. Holy! The word escaped before he could stop it. Lena looked up, noticing him for the first time. She followed his gaze to her arm, to the tattoo she'd stopped thinking about years ago. For a moment, their eyes met, and Hartley felt the full weight of his earlier dismissiveness crash down on him like a collapsing building. You need something, Sergeant? Her voice was neutral, professional, but her eyes held something that made him want to look away. No, ma'am, just checking on your progress. I'll have everything ready by 0400. Tell the commander he can inspect whenever he likes. Bye. Hartley backed out of the armory, his mind racing. He found Kane in the command post, bent over a tactical display with Sullivan and Webb. Commander? His voice came out higher than he intended. Sir, I think you need to see something. Kane didn't look up. If this is about the new lieutenant, I'm busy. She's got the trident, sir. That got his attention. Kane's head snapped up, his gray eyes sharp as broken glass. What? Seal trident tattoo, left forearm. Hartley swallowed hard. And below it? Devgru, sir. She's Team 6. The room went absolutely still. Sullivan's face betrayed nothing, but something flickered in his eyes. Relief, maybe? Or vindication? Webb straightened up slowly, his linebacker frame suddenly tense. Brennan, who'd been cleaning his sidearm in the corner, froze mid-motion. You're certain? It wasn't a question. Yes, sir. I saw it clearly. Kane was already moving, his long strides eating up the distance to the armory. The others followed, a small parade of men about to have their assumptions shattered. They found Elena reassembling the third Barrett. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, each component sliding into place with the satisfied click of proper engineering. She sensed them before she saw them. 5 men crowding the doorway, their body language a mix of disbelief and dawning respect. She finished seating the bolt, checked the action, then set the rifle carefully in its case. Only then did she turn to face them. Kane's eyes went to her arm, to the tattoo that changed everything. For a long moment he couldn't speak, couldn't process what he was seeing. Thomas Mercer's daughter, his little girl, wearing the mark that fewer than 3,000 people on Earth had earned the right to wear. Where did you earn that trident, Lieutenant? His voice was steady, but barely. Elena met his gaze, and in her eyes Kane saw something he recognized. The same unwavering focus Thomas had possessed, the same steel core wrapped in quiet competence. Coronado, sir, BUD/S Class 358. Graduated November 2020. She paused. Selected for DevGru in 2021. Green Team training, then operational deployment. 18 months in Syria, 6 in Iraq, final rotation in Afghanistan before the withdrawal. The numbers were staggering. 18 combat deployments between 23 and 26 years old. Most SEALs didn't see that kind of action in 10 years. Kane did the math. His military mind automatically calculated timelines and implications. August 2021. He said it slowly. You were there, in Kabul. Yes, sir. Your father, the words stuck in his throat like broken glass. My father was Master Chief Thomas Mercer, SEAL Team 3, Force Recon Attachment, 33 years of service. Her voice didn't waver, but Kane heard the edge beneath the words, sharp as a combat knife. He died August 15th, 2021, in a classified operation outside Kabul. The official report said tactical error, command failure, bad intelligence. I read that report, Kane said quietly. Then you read a lie, sir. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a fired weapon. Sullivan shifted his weight, his expression carefully neutral. Webb and Brennan exchanged glances. Hartley looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. That's a serious allegation, Lieutenant. Yes, sir, it is. Elena rolled down her sleeves, covering the tattoo, covering the scars that Kane now realized marked her skin, battle wounds that told their own stories. My father was many things, Commander Kane, but careless wasn't one of them. Neither was stupid. Someone sold his team out. Someone on our side fed intelligence to the enemy. Her voice remained level, but her hands had curled into fists at her sides. 4 SEALs died in that ambush. My father was one of them. She moved to the cleaning station, her hands methodical as she wiped down tools that were already clean. The repetitive motion seemed to center her, to keep something carefully controlled from breaking free. Before he died, my father sent me a message. 3 words on a scratchy satellite phone connection. She looked up, meeting Kane's eyes directly. He said, find the truth. The command post felt smaller now, the walls pressing in with the weight of revelation. Kane thought about Panama, about the chaos of Just Cause, about Thomas Mercer throwing him behind cover, taking rounds meant for a young officer who'd been too slow to read the ambush. He thought about the debt he'd carried for 35 years, the guilt of surviving when better men died. And you think the truth is here? His voice was rough. In Montana? I think the truth is wherever weapons deals and intelligence leaks intersect, sir. And right now, that intersection runs through this operation. Elena finished with the tools and turned to face him fully. The tactical nuclear device you're trying to intercept, the intelligence on its location, the timeline of the deal. She paused. Does any of it feel familiar to you, Commander? Does any of it feel just a little too clean? Kane's jaw tightened. The honest answer was yes. The intelligence on this operation had come through channels that made him uncomfortable, from sources that seemed too willing to share. The entire setup felt orchestrated, like pieces moving on a chessboard he couldn't quite see. You're suggesting this is a trap, Webb said from the doorway. I'm suggesting someone wants us here. Lena's correction was precise. Whether that makes it a trap depends on what they want. Brennan spoke up, his voice gravelly. And what do you want, Lieutenant? Why are you really here? Lena was quiet for a moment, her gaze distant, focused on something the rest of them couldn't see. When she spoke, her voice was soft but absolutely certain. I'm here to finish what my father started. I'm here to find the person who sold him out and make sure they never do it again. And I'm here to prove that Master Chief Thomas Mercer died doing his duty, not making mistakes. She looked at each of them in turn. That's what I want, Staff Sergeant. Justice, truth, and maybe a little bit of revenge. The honesty was startling. Most people wrap their motives in noble causes and patriotic language. Elena Mercer laid hers out like cards on a table, daring them to object. Kane made a decision, the same kind of split-second call he'd made 1,000 times in combat. Trust or don't, accept or reject. Live or die based on judgment and instinct. Sullivan, get her a full-gear loadout. Webb, Brennan, integrate her into the tactical brief. Hartley, Caldwell, I want a full breakdown of approach vectors by 2200. He turned back to Elena. You're right that this operation feels wrong. You're right that the intelligence is too clean. So we're going to plan for the mission we've been assigned, but we're also going to plan for the one we might actually face. Yes, sir. And Lieutenant, Kane's voice softened fractionally, your father saved my life in Panama. I've carried that debt for 35 years. I can't repay him, but maybe I can help his daughter. Whatever truth you're chasing, whatever justice you need, I'm with you. Something flickered across Elena's face, emotion carefully controlled but present. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. You might not like what we find. The briefing room filled over the next hour as the team assembled for the tactical breakdown. Someone had made coffee, the kind of overbrewed military sludge that could strip paint off a tank. Someone else had produced a box of protein bars that tasted like sweetened cardboard. These were the rituals of soldiers preparing for violence, the small comforts before the storm. Kane spread the satellite imagery across the table. High-resolution photographs showing their target in stark detail. An abandoned mining complex in the mountains, 40 miles east. 3 buildings nestled in a valley. Soviet-era construction from some long-forgotten Cold War project. Concrete and steel that had weathered 40 years of Montana winters. Intelligence says the exchange happens in 60 hours, Kane began, his finger tracing the perimeter. Tactical nuclear device, probably stripped from a Russian stockpile in the 90s, small enough to fit in a briefcase, powerful enough to level 6 city blocks. He let that sink in. The buyer is unknown. The seller is former KGB, connected to organized crime networks that reach from Moscow to Miami. This is the kind of deal that happens once in a decade, the kind that changes the balance of power if it goes through. Webb leaned over the photos. Security estimate? 15 to 20 contractors. Mixed nationality, probably former military from half a dozen countries. Light armor, mostly small arms. Maybe 1 or 2 vehicle-mounted weapons. Approach vectors? That's what we're here to discuss. Kane looked around the table. Standard protocol calls for overwatch position here. He tapped a ridge 800 meters from the target, with entry teams approaching from north and south. But I want alternatives. I want contingencies. And I want to plan for this being something other than what we've been told. Elena had been studying the imagery in silence. Her green eyes moved across the photographs with the intensity of someone reading a language the others couldn't quite see. Finally, she spoke. The perimeter is wrong. Everyone looked at her. Explain, Kane said. She pulled one of the photos closer, pointing to details the others had glossed over. See these positions? They're set up for external threat, watching the roads, covering the approaches. But there's minimal internal security. No overlapping fields of fire, no fallback positions. Her finger traced the defensive layout. It's like they're more worried about someone coming in than something going wrong inside. So they're confident, Hartley offered. Or they're expecting different guests. Elena's finger moved to another part of the image. And here, this vehicle, it's positioned for rapid egress, not security. Someone in that building is ready to leave in a hurry. Sullivan had been quiet, but now he leaned forward, his old eyes sharp. You think it's a meeting, not just a handoff? I think someone important is going to be there, someone who doesn't want to be identified. She straightened up. If I wanted to set up a trap for a special operations team, this is exactly how I do it. Make the target juicy enough to draw them in. Make the security look manageable but not suspiciously light. Then have overwhelming force ready to respond once they're committed. The room went quiet as the implications sank in. Brennan broke the silence. You're saying we're the real target? I'm saying we might be, or we might be a convenient bonus. Elena met his eyes. Either way, we need to plan for it. Kane studied her, seeing not Thomas Mercer's daughter anymore, but a trained operator, someone who'd survived 18 combat deployments by being smart, cautious, and ruthlessly realistic. The kind of soldier he wanted on his team. All right, he nodded slowly. We plan for both scenarios. Sullivan, I want you and Mercer to develop an alternative approach vector, something that doesn't follow the expected path. Webb, Brennan, work on rapid extraction scenarios. If this goes bad, I want multiple ways to call for support and multiple ways to disappear. The team dispersed to their assignments, the command post filled with the focused energy of professionals doing what they did best. Elena found herself at a secondary table with Sullivan, spreading out topographical maps that showed terrain the satellites couldn't quite capture. You handled that well, Sullivan said quietly, his voice pitched low. I handled it honestly. Whether that's well remains to be seen. Your father would be proud. Elena's hand stilled on the map. My father would be alive if someone hadn't sold him out. That's what matters now. Revenge won't bring him back, little warrior. No. She looked up, meeting his eyes, and Sullivan saw the steel beneath the grief. But justice might help me sleep at night, and making sure it never happens again, that's worth whatever it costs. Sullivan reached across the table, his weathered hand covering hers. Just remember what your father taught you. Stay smart. Stay controlled. Anger makes you sloppy. I remember Uncle Frank. I remember everything he taught me. They worked through the night. The team came together in the way that good units do, finding rhythm and trust despite the circumstances. By 0300, they had 3 different operational plans, 2 backup extraction routes, and enough contingencies to make even the pessimists feel cautiously prepared. Elena had finished with the weapons hours ago, every rifle cleaned and function checked, every component gleaming and ready. She'd worked through it mechanically, the familiar task giving her hands something to do while her mind processed the larger problem. Somewhere out there, within reach but still hidden, was the person who'd killed her father. The person who'd sold out American operators for money or ideology or whatever corrupted currency traders dealt in. She stepped outside at 0400, needing air, needing space from the close confines of the command post. The snow had stopped, leaving the world crystalline and clean under a sky full of stars. Her breath plumed in the frigid air, each exhalation a small ghost that dissipated into darkness. Can't sleep? She turned to find Kane standing a few meters away, a cup of coffee steaming in his hands. He ditched his jacket, apparently immune to the cold or too tired to care. Sleep's overrated, sir. So's rank when it's just the two of us. He moved to stand beside her, looking out at the same stars. Call me Marcus. Elena nodded, accepting the informality. In the field, especially on small teams, the lines of hierarchy blurred into something more pragmatic. Your father and I went through SEAL training together, Kane said, his voice quiet against the silence. Back when it was still UDT before BUD/S became the standard. We were kids, 19, 20 years old, thought we were the toughest things alive. He took a sip of his coffee. Hell Week broke that illusion pretty quick. He told me about Hell Week, said the only way through was one evolution at a time. That's what he told everyone. It's how he got through, how he helped the rest of us get through. Kane was quiet for a moment. Panama was my first real combat. I was a lieutenant, green as grass, thought I knew everything because I had bars on my collar. His voice grew distant with memory. William was a chief by then, old hand at 25. We hit resistance near Torrijos Airport, and I froze, just for a second. But in combat, a second is forever. He turned to look at her. Your father threw me behind cover, took the rounds that should have killed me, 3 of them. One in the vest, one through the shoulder, one grazed his head. Should have killed him. Would have killed most people. He never talked much about Panama, Elena said softly. He wouldn't. That wasn't who he was. Kane finished his coffee, crushed the cup, tossed it toward a waste bin 15 feet away. It landed perfectly. He just looked at me after, bleeding from 3 holes, and said, next time, don't think, just move. Best advice you ever got? Best advice anyone ever gave me. Kane's expression grew serious. I've been doing this for 40 years, Elena. I've seen a lot of operators, a lot of warriors. Your father was special, not because he was the strongest or the fastest. There were always guys who could outlift him or outrun him. He paused. He was special because he understood what this job really costs, and he did it anyway. He understood the price and paid it willingly. Until someone took the choice away from him. Yeah, Kane's voice went hard, until that. They stood in silence for a while, 2 soldiers in the darkness, breathing clouds of vapor into the Montana night. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. The sound was lonely and clear, echoing off the mountains. Tomorrow we move on that complex, Kane said finally. Whatever we find there, whatever truth you're chasing, I need you focused. I need you sharp. Can you do that? Elena thought about her father. About the last time she'd seen him alive, at a family barbecue, grilling steaks and arguing about baseball. She thought about the flag they'd handed her at the funeral, folded into a perfect triangle, as if geometry could contain grief. She thought about the message he'd left her. 3 words that had driven her for 3 years. Find the truth. I can do that, Marcus. I can be whatever you need me to be. Good. He turned to head back inside. Get some rest. We roll out at 1800. He walked away, leaving Elena alone with the stars and the palm and the weight of what was coming. She stood there a while longer, letting the cold seep through her clothes, letting it sharpen her focus. Somewhere out there, answers waited. Somewhere out there, justice had an appointment to keep. Tomorrow, the truth would start to reveal itself. Tomorrow, the man who killed her father would face his reckoning. Tomorrow, Master Chief Thomas Mercer's daughter would finish what he started. She turned and walked back inside, ready for whatever came next. The convoy rolled out at 1800 exactly. 2 Humvees painted the dull gray of winter camouflage, their engines rumbling through the Montana wilderness like distant thunder. The sun had already begun its descent behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed too beautiful for what lay ahead. Elena sat in the second vehicle, wedged between Hartley and Caldwell. Her gear had been checked and rechecked until every buckle and strap had become part of her body. The Barrett Masari 82A, one rode beside her, wrapped in a drag bag, 50 caliber rounds loaded with the kind of precision that could split a man's skull at 1,000 yards. Outside, the landscape slid past in shades of white and gray. Snow-covered fields stretched to horizons, broken only by skeletal trees and the occasional farmhouse. Lights already burning against the early winter darkness. This was wild country, the kind of place where people disappeared and nature didn't bother keeping secrets. They were 40 miles from the target. Maybe an hour if the road stayed clear. Maybe longer if the weather turned. Kane rode in the lead vehicle with Sullivan and Webb, maintaining radio silence, navigating by GPS and memorized landmarks. The plan was simple in concept, complicated in execution. Get within 2 miles of the target, establish overwatch, wait for the exchange to begin, then move in fast and surgical. Extract the nuclear device, capture or eliminate the principals, disappear before anyone could respond. Simple, except nothing about this felt simple. Elena watched the terrain through her window, her mind cataloging distances and angles, cover and concealment, the thousand small details that separated good operators from dead ones. Beside her, Hartley sat with his M4A1 between his knees, eyes half closed but not sleeping. Combat veterans learn to rest anywhere, anytime, storing up energy for when the shooting started. "You ever worked cold weather before?" he asked, his voice low. "Mostly Middle East, some Africa. Different kind of cold here, gets in your bones, makes everything harder. Shooting, moving, thinking." Well, Elena nodded. She'd trained in cold weather environments, done winter warfare courses in Alaska, but Hartley was right. Cold was cold until you had to fight in it. Then it became an enemy all its own. "Your old man," Hartley said carefully after a long pause. "He was the real deal. Heard stories about him even when I was going through training. The Phantom, they called him. Said he could ghost through enemy lines like smoke. He was good at his job. Better than good from what I heard. Legendary." Hartley shifted his weight as the Humvee bounced over a rough patch of road. Must be hard, living up to that. Elena turned to look at him, seeing in his eyes something other than the dismissive attitude from before. Not quite respect yet, but acknowledgement. Recognition that she'd earned her place through the same hell that had forged him. "I'm not trying to live up to anything," she said quietly. "I'm trying to finish what he started. There's a difference." Before Hartley could respond, Kane's voice crackled through their earpieces. "All stations, hold position. We have got movement ahead." The convoy slowed, then stopped. Through the windshield, Elena could see the lead Humvee maybe 30 meters forward, its brake lights glowing red in the gathering darkness. Brennan, who was driving their vehicle, killed the engine. Suddenly, the world was very quiet. Elena slipped out of the Humvee with her weapon ready, moving to the roadside where Kane and Sullivan stood, studying something through night vision binoculars. When she got close enough, Kane handed them to her without a word. She pressed the optics to her eyes, and the world transformed into shades of green. A mile ahead, where the road curved through a narrow valley, vehicles blocked the passage. 3 of them, arranged in a staggered pattern that said checkpoint or ambush. Figures moved between them, maybe 6 or 7, too far to identify, but close enough to be a problem. "Local police," Webb suggested, coming up beside them. "Wrong vehicles." Sullivan's voice carried the certainty of hard experience. "Those are civilian SUVs, high-end, the kind organized crime uses." "Could be smugglers," Brennan offered. "Could be worse." Elena studied the scene, her tactical mind processing options. The road was the only clear route to their target. Going around meant rough terrain, delays they couldn't afford, and the risk of losing the element of surprise. Going through meant engagement, potential casualties, definitely exposure. "They're not random," she said, lowering the binoculars. "Look at the spacing. They're watching for something specific, waiting for someone." Kane took the binoculars back, looked again, and cursed softly. "You're right. This is a screening position. Someone knew we were coming." The implication hung in the cold air like a held breath. Someone knew. Someone had leaked their route, their timeline, their operation. Just like Afghanistan, just like the ambush that had killed her father. "We need to abort," Brennan said, his scarred knuckles white on his rifle. "Fall back, regroup, come at this from a different angle." "We've got 58 hours before the exchange," Webb countered. "We abort now, we might not get another shot at that device." Kane stood silent, his weathered face unreadable in the dim light. Elena could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. The algebra of risk versus reward, mission versus men. It was the same math her father had done 1,000 times. The same impossible equation that had no perfect answer. "There's another route," Elena's voice cut through the debate. "Older road, logging trail from the Cold War era when they built surveillance stations in these mountains. Runs parallel about 2 miles north. It's not on most maps, probably rough as hell, but it should bypass this position entirely." Everyone turned to look at her. "How do you know about it?" Kane asked. "Because I spent the last week studying every map, every satellite image, every piece of terrain intelligence I could find." Her eyes met his. If someone's trying to funnel us, I wanted to know where the fences were. Sullivan made a sound that might have been approval. Kane studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Show me. They gathered around the hood of the Humvee. Elena spread out a topographical map that looked like it had survived the Cold War itself. Her finger traced a thin line that curved through terrain marked with elevation contours. Here, it parallels our current route but stays in the high ground. Harder going, especially in snow. But it should put us within striking distance without going through that checkpoint. Should, Hartley repeated, but you don't know for sure. I know it exists. I know it runs where we need to go. The rest is risk management. Kane made his decision with the same swift certainty that had kept him alive for 4 decades. We take the logging road. Sullivan, you're on point in the lead vehicle. Mercer, you're with me. Everyone else, tight formation, weapons hot. And if anyone so much as sneezes wrong, we go loud and fast. He looked at each of them. Questions? There were none. They'd all made peace with uncertainty long ago. The logging road was everything Elena had warned, and worse. Broken pavement gave way to gravel, gave way to packed dirt, turned to frozen mud. The Humvees crawled along at 15 miles per hour, their suspensions groaning, headlights off, navigating by moonlight and night vision. Trees pressed close on both sides. Skeletal branches scraped against metal, like fingernails on a coffin lid. Elena rode in the lead vehicle now, pressed between Kane and Sullivan. Her eyes scanned the darkness for threats that could materialize from nothing. The Barrett rode across her lap, too long for the confined space but too valuable to leave behind. This was the weapon that could reach out and touch someone at distances that made rifles into artillery. Your father and I came through country like this once, Sullivan said, his voice barely audible over the engine. Not this exact spot, but similar. Back in '91, right after the Soviet Union collapsed. Everything was weapons disappearing, nukes unaccounted for. We were part of a team securing sites, making sure nothing fell into the wrong hands. Did you succeed? Mostly. There were always rumors, though, whispers of things that slipped through the cracks. A tactical device here, some uranium there. The kind of stuff that keeps intelligence analysts awake at night. Sullivan paused, his eyes distant with memory. Your father hated it. Hated knowing that somewhere out there someone had the means to kill thousands. And we couldn't stop it. Is that why you think this operation is real? Because the device actually exists? I think the device exists, Sullivan said slowly. I'm less sure about everything else. They drove in silence after that, each lost in their own thoughts, their own preparations for what was coming. Elena thought about her father's last message, 3 words that had driven her across continents and through 3 years of investigation. Find the truth. Simple words. Impossible task. But she was close now. She could feel it. The radio crackled. Brennan's voice from the second Humvee. Lead vehicle, we've got a tail. Single vehicle, lights off, maintaining distance. About 500 meters back. Everyone in the lead Humvee tensed. Kane picked up the handset. Confirmed visual? Confirmed SUV, same type as the checkpoint. Could be coincidence, Webb offered. Could be, Kane said. But his tone suggested he didn't believe it any more than Webb did. He looked at Sullivan. Options? Keep moving. See if they follow all the way to the target. Sullivan's voice was measured. Or stop now. Deal with them. Risk exposure. Elena was watching through the side mirror, catching glimpses of the trailing vehicle when moonlight hit it just right. They're not trying to hide, she said. If they wanted to stay covert, they'd drop back further, kill their engine occasionally, use terrain masking. Her eyes narrowed. This is deliberate. They want us to know they're there. To what end? Webb asked. To push us forward, to keep us moving toward the target even though we know something's wrong. She turned to Kane. It's herding behavior. They're not trying to stop us. They're making sure we don't turn back. Kane's jaw clenched. Every instinct he'd developed over 40 years was screaming at him to abort, to extract, to live to fight another day. But the nuclear device was real. The threat was real. And if they walked away, it would disappear into the black market and resurface somewhere as a mushroom cloud over a city full of civilians who would never know how close they'd come to being saved. We proceed, he said finally. but weapons free. Anyone makes a move, we engage without hesitation. He looked at Elena. And Mercer, if this goes bad, you make sure that device doesn't leave the area, whatever it takes. Yes, sir. The last 10 miles took an hour. The logging road deteriorated into something that barely qualified as a trail, forcing them to dismount and walk the final 2 miles. They cached the Humvees in a ravine, camouflaged with cut branches and snow, then moved out on foot in a tactical column. Sullivan on point, followed by Kane and Elena, then the others spread at 5-meter intervals. The mining complex appeared through the trees like something from a Cold War nightmare. 3 buildings arranged in a rough triangle, concrete walls stained by decades of weather, windows either broken or bricked over. The whole site surrounded by a rusted chain-link fence that had collapsed in places. Moonlight painted it silver and black, all harsh shadows and exposed angles. Elena dropped prone at the tree line 600 meters from the nearest building and pulled the Barrett into position. Through the scope, the world became a narrow tunnel of magnified reality. She could see the vehicles Sullivan had mentioned, 4 of them now instead of 2. Could see figures moving between buildings, at least 15, maybe more. Could see lights in what looked like the central structure, suggesting power, suggesting active occupation. I count 17 tangos, she whispered into her throat mic. 4 vehicles. Looks like 2 are armored. Foot patrol patterns suggest they're expecting trouble, but not from this direction. Most of their attention is on the road approach. Kane settled beside her with his own optics. Confirmed, I see the same. He keyed his radio. Sullivan, Caldwell, your Alpha team, north approach, entry through that collapsed section of fence. Webb, Brennan, your Bravo team, south side through the maintenance gate. Hartley, your Overwatch with Mercer. Engage only on my mark or if compromise is imminent. The teams acknowledged in whispers, then melted into the darkness like ghosts. Elena tracked their movement through her scope, watching Sullivan and Caldwell flow through the terrain with the smooth confidence of men who'd done this hundreds of times. Webb and Brennan were almost as good, younger but still professional, their weapons tracking potential threats as they moved. Your father taught you to shoot? Hartley asked, settling into position beside her with his own rifle, an M110 semi-automatic sniper system. Taught me everything. Started when I was 8 with a .22, worked my way up. By 16, I was shooting the Barrett. She adjusted her scope, compensating for wind, elevation, the rotation of the earth at this latitude. He said shooting was like meditation. Everything else falls away until it's just you and the target and the space between. Zen and the art of putting holes in things. Something like that. They fell silent, watching their teams advance. Sullivan and Caldwell reached the fence, slipped through, disappeared into the shadows of the northern building. Webb and Brennan were 30 seconds behind, moving toward the southern approach. Everything was going according to plan, which was exactly when plans usually fell apart. Elena's scope swept across the compound in a methodical pattern, checking sectors, looking for the detail that didn't fit. She found it on her third sweep, a man standing on the roof of the central building, barely visible, holding what looked like a radio. Not a guard. Guards watched outward. This man was watching the other guards, coordinating, controlling. I've got a controller, she whispered. Central building, rooftop, northeast corner, male, approximately 40 years old, civilian clothes armed with a sidearm and radio. Can you take him? Kane asked. 600 meters, light wind, maybe 3 knots from the east. Temperature 18 degrees. The Barrett could make the shot in her sleep. But taking it will alert everyone. Hold position. Let's see what Alpha and Bravo find. Sullivan's voice came through, barely audible. Alpha team in position. I've got eyes on the interior through a broken window. Multiple hostiles. Looks like 12 to 15 in there. A pause. Christ, Kane, they're waiting for something. This isn't a handoff. This is a reception. Before Kane could respond, Webb broke in. Bravo team has the south side. I've got visual on what looks like the package. Metal case, right size for a tactical device. Another pause. Longer this time. But Kane, something's wrong. There are too many people for a simple exchange. This is bigger than intelligence suggested. Elena's scope found the man on the roof again. He was talking into his radio now, animated, clearly receiving information. Then he turned, and even at 600 meters through a night vision scope, Elena saw his face clearly. Her blood turned to ice. She knew that face, had seen it in briefings, in classified files, in the nightmares that still woke her at 3 in the morning. Captain Derek Vance, her father's protege, the man Thomas Mercer had mentored for 4 years, had trusted like a son, had believed in absolutely. The man who had disappeared 7 months after her father's death, his military records sealed, his whereabouts unknown, until now. Kane. Her voice came out steady despite the rage building in her chest. The controller. I know him. Who is it? Captain Derek Vance, Navy SEAL formerly attached to DevGru. He went missing after Afghanistan. Been classified as AWOL for 2 years. The silence on the radio was absolute. Then Kane, his voice tight. You're certain? I'd stake my life on it, sir. Elena kept her crosshairs centered on Vance's face. He was my father's student. My father trained him, recommended him for DevGru, vouched for him when others had doubts. Her finger found the trigger guard. If he's here, this isn't a coincidence. This is personal. Sullivan's voice cut through, urgent but controlled. We need to abort. If Vance is here, he knows our capabilities, our tactics. He'll have planned for everything we can throw at him. Negative, Kane said. Then, after a pause, heavy with meaning, I knew something was wrong. Elena's head snapped toward him. What? 6 months ago? Kane's voice was tight. Vance contacted me, tried to recruit me, offered money, protection, said the wars were over and it was time to cash in. I refused, reported it through back channels, but he disappeared before anyone could act. His gray eyes found Elena's through the darkness. I suspected he was the leak that killed your father, but I had no proof, not until tonight. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Elena spoke, her voice like ice. You knew, and you didn't tell me. I suspected. There's a difference. Kane's tone held no apology. And I brought you here because I thought Vance would surface if the bait was right. Your father would have done the same thing. My father is dead because of him. And tonight we end it together. Kane's voice hardened. We're too committed to abort now. Alpha, Bravo, hold position but prepare for compromise. Hartley, Mercer, if this goes loud, your priority is Vance. He does not leave this area alive. Understood. Understood, Elena said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. What happened next took less than 10 seconds, but felt like an eternity. The lights in the compound suddenly blazed to full brightness. Spotlights mounted on the buildings activated in sequence, turning night into day. Sullivan and Caldwell were caught in the open, 20 meters from cover, their positions exposed. Webb and Brennan had slightly better concealment, but were still clearly visible to anyone looking. Then a voice boomed across the compound, amplified by speakers. A voice Elena recognized from 100 family dinners, from training sessions, from the last Christmas before Afghanistan. Welcome to Montana, Commander Kane, Master Chief Sullivan, and especially to you, Elena. I've been expecting you. All of you. The tactical situation collapsed into chaos. Sullivan and Caldwell went prone, scrambling for cover as gunfire erupted from multiple positions. Webb and Brennan returned fire, their muzzle flashes bright in the darkness. The contractors in the compound moved with professional efficiency, coordinated fire teams engaging from prepared positions. All teams, suppress and maneuver. Kane's voice was calm despite the chaos. Mercer, light them up. Lena's finger found the trigger, her breathing steady, her world reduced to the scope's view. The Barrett roared. The recoil slammed into her shoulder with familiar force. 600 meters away, a contractor dropped, his chest opened by .50 caliber destruction. She worked the bolt, acquired a new target, fired again, another man down, this one trying to flank Sullivan's position. Beside her, Hartley was engaging with methodical precision, his semi-automatic rifle barking every 2 seconds. 3 rounds, 3 hits. Enemy fire diminishing from the southern sector, But there were too many of them. For every contractor they dropped, two more appeared. This wasn't a security detail. This was a well-trained defensive force, exactly as Elena had feared. Sullivan and Caldwell made it to cover, a concrete barrier that protected them from direct fire. They returned shots when they could, but they were pinned, unable to advance or retreat. Webb and Brennan were in better position, but equally stuck, trading fire with enemies they couldn't quite see. Through her scope, Elena tracked Vance as he moved along the rooftop, directing his forces with hand signals and radio commands. He was staying low, using the roof's HVA units for cover. But he was there, visible, vulnerable if she could just get a clean shot. "I'm going for Vance," she told Kane. 60 seconds, I'll have an angle. "Do it fast, we can't hold here long." She shifted position, moving 10 meters to her right to get around the obstruction blocking her view. Hartley provided covering fire, his rifle keeping heads down while she relocated. The Barrett's weight pulled at her shoulder, but she'd carried worse burdens over harder ground. Her new position gave her the angle she needed. Vance was visible now, exposed for maybe 3 seconds as he moved between cover points. Not much time, but enough. Elena settled into the shooting position, her body becoming one with the weapon. Breathing slowed, heart rate dropped. The world fell away until there was only the scope, the target, the mathematics of trajectory in wind and justice. Vance stepped into the open. Elena's finger began the trigger press, smooth and steady, exactly as her father had taught her 20 years ago in the California desert. Then Vance turned, looked directly at her position 600 meters away, and smiled. He raised his hand, held up a radio, pressed a button. The explosion came from behind them, from the ravine where they'd hidden the Humvees, a massive detonation that lit up the night sky. The shockwave rolled over them like a physical thing. Secondary explosions followed as fuel tanks caught fire, as ammunition cooked off, as their extraction vehicles and all their reserve supplies turned into a fireball that could probably be seen from space. "Vehicles are gone," Brennan shouted over the radio. "We're on foot. No evac, no backup." Vance's amplified voice came again, carrying across the compound like a mockery of everything they'd planned. "Did you really think I wouldn't plan for everything, Elena? I learned from the best. Your father taught me well, especially the part about always having a backup plan." Elena's finger completed the trigger press. The Barrett fired. The shot was perfect. The bullet tracked exactly where she'd aimed. But Vance had already moved, dropping behind cover the instant before the round arrived. It missed him by inches, sparking off metal where his head had been. Damn it, she worked the bolt, tried to reacquire, but he was gone. Disappeared into the building's interior. "All teams, fall back to Rally Point Omega." Kane's voice cut through the chaos. "Fighting retreat, covering fire, move now." Sullivan and Caldwell broke from cover, sprinting toward the tree line while Webb and Brennan provided suppression. The contractors pursued, their fire disciplined and accurate. Too accurate. These weren't random hired guns. These were professionals, possibly former military, definitely well-trained. Elena and Hartley put rounds down range as fast as they could acquire targets, buying seconds for their teammates to reach safety. She dropped 3 more contractors. Hartley got 2, but more kept coming. It was like fighting a hydra. Then Sullivan went down. He was 50 meters from the tree line, running hard despite his 64 years. When a round caught him in the leg, he fell, rolled, came up trying to crawl, but another burst of fire forced him flat. Caldwell turned back immediately, but Webb grabbed him. "You'll just get killed. We need support." "I'll get him," Elena said. She was already moving. Left the Barrett. It was too heavy for what came next. Drew her Sig Sauer P226 and started running towards Sullivan's position. "Mercer, negative." Kane's order was absolute. "That's a kill zone. You'll never make it." She ignored him. Sullivan was her father's best friend, the man who'd taught her half of what she knew, who'd been at every birthday and graduation and milestone of her life. She wasn't leaving him to die in Montana mud. The distance was 50 meters that felt like 50 miles. She ran low, weaving, using every bit of cover the terrain offered. Rounds snapped past her so close she felt their passage, but none found flesh. She reached Sullivan, grabbed his tactical vest. started dragging him back towards safety. "Elena, no!" Sullivan gasped, his face pale with pain and blood loss. "Leave me. Get out." "Shut up, Uncle Frank. You don't get to die today." Her legs burned. Her lungs screamed. Every meter was agony. 40 meters to the tree line. 35, 30. Hartley and Webb were providing covering fire, their rifles hammering, but it wasn't enough. The contractors were closing in, maneuvering to cut off her retreat. 20 meters. A round hit her left shoulder, a sharp spike of pain that nearly dropped her. But she'd been shot before, knew how to compartmentalize it, knew how to keep moving despite the damage. She shifted her grip on Sullivan, pulled harder. 15 meters. 10. Then Kane was there, emerging from the trees with his rifle up, firing precisely placed shots that dropped two contractors and made the others dive for cover. He grabbed Sullivan's other arm, and together they hauled the wounded operator into the forest. But Hartley was still out there, still providing cover. Elena saw him stand to relocate, saw the contractor emerge from behind a vehicle, saw the muzzle flash that caught Hartley's center mass. He went down hard, his rifle clattering away. "Hartley!" Caldwell's scream cut through the chaos. Elena started back, but Kane's hand caught her vest. "He's gone. We have to move." She looked back one more time, saw Hartley trying to crawl, saw the contractors closing in. Then the world went white as someone tossed a grenade, and when her vision cleared, Hartley was still. They didn't stop running until they were a mile away, until the sounds of gunfire faded to distant echoes. When they finally collapsed behind a fallen tree, gasping for breath, Elena assessed the damage. Sullivan's leg was bad, femoral artery possibly nicked, bleeding heavily despite the tourniquet Caldwell had already applied. Her own shoulder was through and through, painful but not immediately life-threatening. "Sound off," Kane ordered, his voice steady despite their desperate situation. "Alpha lead, mobile," Sullivan managed, his teeth gritted against the pain. "Alpha 2, mobile." Caldwell confirmed, his voice broken. "Bravo lead, mobile," Webb said. "Bravo 2, mobile." Brennan added, "Overwatch 2, mobile." Elena said, "Wounded but operational." The silence where Hartley should have answered was deafening. Kane looked at his team, at the blood and exhaustion and grim determination. They'd lost their vehicles, most of their equipment, any element of surprise. They'd lost Hartley. They were 40 miles from friendly territory. On foot, with at least one serious casualty, and unknown numbers of hostiles hunting them. By any rational assessment, they should abort. Call for extraction. Get Sullivan to a hospital. Mourn their dead. Live to fight another day. But Elena's mind was racing with different calculations. Vance was here. The man who'd killed her father was less than a mile away. He'd known they were coming, had prepared for them, had turned their operation into an ambush, which meant he was the leak, the source, the traitor who'd sold out her father's team in Afghanistan. And probably a dozen other operations before and since. "He's not getting away," she said, her voice low, but carrying absolute conviction. "Vance, he's the one. He's been the traitor all along." Kane turned to her, his gray eyes hard. "You have proof?" "I have certainty. He was my father's student. My father discovered something about him, something bad enough to get him killed. Vance has been running ever since, selling intelligence, staying one step ahead." She looked at each of them. "That nuclear device is real, but it's also bait. Vance is using it to draw in operators he needs to eliminate, people who might know what he's done." Her voice caught. "People like us. People like Hartley." The team exchanged glances. Sullivan, despite his pain, nodded slowly. "It fits." Thomas suspected someone close, someone who knew operations before they happened. He was gathering evidence when he died. "We're 40 miles from extraction with no wheels and no backup," Brennan said. "Even if you're right, we can't fight our way through that force. We don't have to fight all of them." Elena's eyes were cold, focused. "Just Vance, we take him down. We can extract later. But if we leave now, he disappears again. And the next team that comes after him dies too." Her voice dropped. "Just like Hartley." Kane was quiet for a long moment, the kind of silence that spoke to the weight of command, to the burden of sending people into danger based on judgment, calls that might be wrong. Finally, he looked at Sullivan. Can you move? Sullivan gritted his teeth. With help, won't be fast, but I can make it. Then here's what we're going to do. Kane pulled out his map, spreading it on the ground. Webb, Brennan, you are taking Sullivan back to Rally Point Delta. There's an old Forest Service road 3 miles west. You get there, you call for extraction. You get the Master Chief to a hospital. No heroics, no delays. They nodded, unhappy but accepting the logic. Caldwell, Mercer, you're with me. We're going back to that compound, and we're going to kill or capture Derek Vance. He paused. After that, we secure the nuclear device or destroy it. He looked at each of them. For Hartley. Sir, Caldwell's voice was thick with grief. What's our extraction plan? Kane smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. We'll figure that out after we complete the mission. Same way we always have. They split up 10 minutes later. Webb and Brennan helped Sullivan towards safety while Kane's smaller team melted back into the darkness. Heading toward the compound, in the confrontation that had been 3 years in the making, the night pressed down on them like a physical weight. Somewhere in the darkness, Derek Vance was preparing for their return. Somewhere in the darkness, a nuclear device waited to change the world. And somewhere in Elena's heart, the rage that had driven her for 3 years was transforming into something colder, something sharper. Not revenge anymore, justice. Elena checked her Sig Sauer, checked her remaining magazines, checked the knife strapped to her leg. The shoulder wound hurt, but pain was just information. It told her she was alive. Everything else was details. Somewhere ahead, Derek Vance was waiting. The man who'd betrayed everything her father stood for. The man who'd sold American lives for money. The man who'd looked Thomas Mercer in the eye while planning his death. The man who'd just added Hartley to his body count. The debt was about to come due, and Elena Mercer intended to collect every penny, with interest. The compound sat quiet now, its earlier chaos replaced by the tense silence of predators waiting. Elena lay prone in the frozen mud, 30 meters from the perimeter fence, her breath coming in controlled intervals that wouldn't fog in the cold air. Beside her, Kane studied the layout through night vision optics, while Caldwell covered their flank from a position 10 meters to the right. 20 minutes had passed since they'd left Sullivan with the extraction team. 20 minutes of careful movement through terrain that wanted to kill them as much as any enemy. But they were here now, back where the ambush had happened. And the compound looked different, calmer. The spotlights dimmed, the frantic movement of contractors replaced by disciplined patrols, professional, organized, waiting. I count 8 tangos visible, Kane whispered. Probably double that inside. Vance knows we're coming back. He's counting on it. Then let's not disappoint him, Elena said. Her shoulder throbbed where the bullet had punched through. But she'd stuffed the wound with gauze and wrapped it tight. The bleeding had stopped. That was enough. Caldwell low-crawled up beside them. I've got a way in. Northeast corner. There's a drainage culvert that runs under the fence. Looks like it feeds into the basement of the main building. Tight squeeze, but we can make it. How tight? Kane asked. You're going to become very familiar with concrete for about 20 meters. Kane considered this. A drainage culvert meant confined space. No room to maneuver. A fatal funnel if someone was waiting on the other end. It also meant getting inside without triggering external sensors, without alerting the patrols, without giving Vance time to prepare. We go in together, he decided. Mercer first, she's smallest. I'll follow, then Caldwell. We clear the basement level, establish a foothold, then work our way up to find Vance and the device. He checked his weapon. Rules of engagement are weapons free. Anyone who's not us is a target. This is not a capture mission anymore. His voice dropped. This is for Hartley. They moved to the culvert entrance, a rusted grate half buried in snow and dead vegetation. Caldwell produced a multi-tool and went to work on the corroded bolts while the others provided security. The metal fought him, decades of rust and winter refusing to yield. But finally the grate came free with a grinding squeal that seemed loud enough to wake the dead. Everyone froze. 30 seconds passed. A minute. No alarm, no shouts, no indication they'd been heard. The wind had been kind, carrying the sound away from the compound. I'll go first, Elena said. Before anyone could argue, she slipped into the culvert. The space was exactly as tight as Caldwell had warned, maybe 2 feet in diameter. The walls slick with ice and something organic that she tried not to think about. She pulled herself forward using elbows and knees, her weapon dragging behind her. The darkness absolute. 20 meters had never felt so long. Every few feet she paused, listening for sounds ahead, for any indication that this tunnel led to a room full of hostiles waiting to turn her into Swiss cheese. But there was only silence, and the distant drip of water, and her own breathing echoing off concrete. Then her hand found empty space. She'd reached the end. Elena eased forward until her head emerged into a larger chamber. Some kind of mechanical room, lit by a single emergency bulb that cast everything in sickly yellow. Old furnaces sat like sleeping giants, their pipes reaching up into darkness. No movement, no sound except the hum of electrical systems. She pulled herself out of the culvert, cleared the immediate area with her Sig Sauer, then keyed her throat mic twice, the signal for all clear. 3 minutes later, all three of them stood in the basement, weapons ready, breath steaming in the cold air. The space was larger than it had first appeared, a warren of rooms and corridors that spoke to Cold War construction, when everything was built to survive a nuclear attack. Concrete walls 2 feet thick, steel doors with locks that looked like they could stop a tank. The perfect place to hide something valuable, or to trap someone who came looking. Kane checked his GPS, orienting himself to the building's layout. Main stairs should be 30 meters north, but there's bound to be sensors, cameras, maybe motion detectors. We need to move like ghosts, Elena said. Or we need to make them come to us. She was staring at a circuit breaker panel on the wall, the kind that controlled power distribution for the entire structure. They're waiting upstairs because they think we'll come up the conventional way. What if we don't? What are you thinking? I'm thinking we kill the power, kill their night vision advantage, and use the chaos to maneuver. She moved to the panel, studying the labels. We can black out everything except emergency lighting. They'll have to come down here to investigate. And when they do, we'll be waiting. Kane smiled, the expression wolfish in the dim light. Your father would have done the same thing. He loved turning the enemy's strengths into weaknesses. Then let's hope I learned the lesson well. They set up quickly, professional and efficient. Caldwell took position covering the main stairwell, using the furnaces as cover and concealment. Kane positioned himself at a side corridor that offered enfilade fire across the open space. Elena stayed at the breaker panel, weapon ready, her good hand on the main power cutoff. On my mark, Kane whispered. 3, 2, 1, execute. Elena threw the breaker. The lights died instantly, plunging the compound into darkness broken only by scattered emergency bulbs. Somewhere above, she heard shouts of confusion, orders being barked in multiple languages. Footsteps pounded on stairs as contractors rushed to investigate. The first three came down fast and careless, their weapon lights sweeping the darkness. They made it 4 steps into the basement before Caldwell opened fire. The suppressed weapon coughed quietly, subsonic rounds punching through flesh and bone. All three went down in a heap at the base of the stairs. Silence returned. Elena could hear her heartbeat, could hear the breath of her teammates, could hear someone upstairs screaming orders to be more careful. To use proper tactics, the next group came slower, 5 of them, moving in a tactical wedge. Weapons and lights coordinated. They were professionals, probably former military, definitely trained. They reached the basement floor and began clearing corners, working the space methodically. But they were fighting in someone else's house now. And Elena knew every shadow. She moved like smoke, circling behind them while they focused on the obvious positions. Her father had taught her this, the art of being where the enemy wasn't looking, of seeing without being seen. She came up behind the last contractor in the wedge and put 2 rounds through the base of his skull before he knew she was there. The others spun at the sound, and that's when Kane opened fire from his position. Caught between 2 directions, the contractors went down hard and fast. One managed to trigger a burst from his rifle before dying, the muzzle flash blinding in the darkness. Rounds sparking off concrete and steel, then quiet again. 8 dead in less than 2 minutes. They're going to try something different now, Kane said. Grenades maybe, or they'll just seal us in and wait for us to suffocate. Then we go up, Elena said, before they can organize. Hit them while they're still reeling. They moved to the stairs, stepping over bodies, ascending into darkness that felt thick enough to touch. The emergency lighting cast weird shadows that turned familiar shapes into monsters. Every corner could hide death. Every doorway could be a fatal funnel. The first floor was a maze of corridors and rooms, most empty, some filled with equipment that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. They cleared each space with practiced efficiency. A three-person ballet of violence and precision. Two more contractors died, caught alone and unprepared. A third tried to run and caught Caldwell's rounds in the spine. Then they reached the central chamber, and everything changed. The room was huge, a former assembly area or warehouse, its ceiling 30 feet high and crisscrossed with catwalks and support beams. In the center, sitting on a reinforced table, was a metal briefcase. Not large, maybe 2 feet by 18 inches, but unmistakable in its purpose. The nuclear device, real, present, deadly. And standing beside it, flanked by 4 contractors with automatic weapons, was Derek Vance. He looked older than Elena remembered, harder. His face had the weathered quality of someone who'd spent too much time in bad places doing worse things. But his eyes were the same, cold, calculating. The eyes of a man who'd learned to live without conscience. Elena, his voice echoed across the empty space. I was wondering if you'd make it this far. Your father would be proud. She stepped into the open. Her Sig Sauer trained on his center mass. Kane and Caldwell spread out behind her, creating a firing line that covered all 4 contractors. Why? The word came out flat, emotionless. She'd practiced this moment in her mind 1,000 times, had imagined screaming at him, cursing him, making him feel the rage that had burned in her for 3 years. But now that the moment was here, she felt only cold certainty. Why did you kill my father? Vance smiled, and there was something almost like sadness in it. I didn't want to. You have to believe that. Thomas was like a father to me. He taught me everything, believed in me when others didn't. His voice dropped. But he discovered something he shouldn't have, something I couldn't let him report. Syria, Kane said, his voice hard. 2019, civilian casualties. You covered it up. 6 people died because of bad intelligence I provided. Vance's tone was matter-of-fact, confessional. 6 innocents. I panicked, blamed it on faulty coordinates. Your father investigated, found the truth. He looked at Elena. He gave me a choice. Confess, or he'd report me himself. So you chose murder instead? I chose survival. Vance's hand moved closer to the briefcase. I'd already been contacted by people who were very interested in American intelligence. Russians mostly, some Chinese. They paid well, and they offered protection. All they wanted was information. His voice hardened. Your father's team in Afghanistan wasn't the first I sold out. Won't be the last. This is war, Elena, the real kind, where money and power matter more than flags and anthems. Elena felt the anger rising, but beneath it, something else. A memory surfacing unbidden. He saved your life. Her voice was quiet, certain. In Syria, before all of this, my father saved your life. Vance's expression flickered, just for a moment. The building collapse, Elena continued. 2018. The one that killed 2 contractors and trapped 3 more. My father went back in, through fire and smoke and collapsing concrete. He pulled you out, carried you half a mile to the extraction point. She took a step forward. He told me about it. Said you cried. Said you swore you'd never forget what he did for you. That was before. Before what? Before you decided his life was worth less than money? Before you traded his trust for Russian rubles? Vance's jaw tightened. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Elena's voice was ice. You owed him everything, and you paid him back with a bullet. The room was absolutely still. Even the contractors seemed uncertain, their weapons wavering slightly. My father died believing in something bigger than himself, Elena said. You died the moment you put a price tag on that belief. You just haven't stopped breathing yet. Vance's smile faded completely. Big words from a little girl playing soldier. You think you're like him? You think you can match what Thomas Mercer was? His voice turned mocking. You're nothing. A diversity hire with a famous father's name. That's all you'll ever be. Elena felt the words hit, felt the old doubts and insecurities that she'd carried through BUUD/S, through DevGru selection, through every mission where she'd had to prove herself again and again. For just a second, she wavered. Then she remembered her father's voice, teaching her to shoot when she was 8 years old. His hand steady on her shoulder, his words about identity being the foundation of excellence, about knowing who you are when everything else falls away. She knew who she was, daughter of Thomas Mercer, Navy SEAL, the woman who would end Derek Vance's treachery here and now. Lower your weapon. One of the contractors set his rifle, tracking toward her. Last warning. Instead, Elena did something none of them expected. She lowered her Sig Sauer completely, let it hang loose at her side. You want me to be like my father? She said quietly. Then I'll do what he would do. Vance's eyes narrowed, suspicious. And what's that? Give you a choice, the same choice you never gave him. She met his gaze across the room, her voice steady. Walk away, leave the device, disappear. I won't chase you, I won't hunt you. Just go. The room went absolutely silent. Even the contractors looked confused, their weapons wavering slightly. You're serious, Vance said. My father believed in mercy, believed in redemption, even for people who didn't deserve it. Elena's hand stayed away from her weapon. I don't know if I have that kind of strength, but I'm willing to try, for him, for Hartley, for everyone you've killed. For a long moment, Vance seemed to consider it. Something flickered across his face, emotion breaking through the cold calculation. Regret, maybe, or the memory of who he'd been before money and fear turned him into this. Then his hand moved toward the briefcase, and Elena saw the detonator attached to its side. I believe you, Vance said. I believe you'd let me walk. That's why I can't. His fingers found the trigger. If I can't have my freedom, no one gets to win. He pressed the button. This time the detonator was real. A metallic beep echoed through the chamber, followed by a digital display on the briefcase flickering to life. Red numbers began counting down. 2 minutes, 1 minute, 59 seconds, 1 minute, 58 seconds, 2 minutes. Vance, what did you do? Kane's voice was sharp. C4 charges throughout the building, enough to bring this whole place down. Vance was backing toward a door behind him. And that device, he gestured to the briefcase. It's armed. You try to move it, it detonates early. 2 minutes to disarm, or everyone within 3 blocks becomes a radiation statistic. His contractors provided covering fire as Vance ran for the exit. Time dilated. Elena saw Vance disappearing through the doorway. Saw the timer. 1:47, 1:46. Saw Kane moving toward the briefcase, his face grim. Every instinct screamed at her to chase Vance, to finish what her father had started, to end the man who'd betrayed everything, to avenge Hartley. But the device was ticking, and Kane was just one man against a bomb that needed 2. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Duty first, little warrior. Revenge never. Kane, she shouted. I'm with you. She holstered her weapon and ran to the briefcase, ignoring Vance's escaping footsteps. Caldwell pursued the traitor while Elena focused on the bomb. 122, 121, 120. I need light, Kane ordered, already working on the case's access panel. Elena aimed her weapon light at the mechanism. Inside was a nightmare of wires and circuits. Kane's hands moved with the steady precision of someone who'd done this before. In Desert Storm, in Panama, in a dozen hellholes where one wrong move meant death. 4 wires, he muttered. Red, blue, yellow, black. Classic setup, but which order? 0058, 0057, 0056. Your call, Marcus, Elena said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Blue first, then yellow. His fingers gripped the wire cutters. If I'm wrong, you're not wrong. 0043, 0042. He cut the blue wire. The timer kept counting. 0038, 0037. Yellow wire, snip. The timer stuttered, flickered. then resumed. 0031, 0030. Damn it! Kane's face was slick with sweat. There's a fail-safe, red or black. One disarms, one detonates immediately. 0022, 0021. Elena stared at the wires, her mind racing through every training scenario, every technical brief. Then she saw it, a tiny scratch on the black wire's insulation. Barely visible, someone had worked on this wire recently, a tell. Her father's voice came to her one final time. Not the words about shooting or meditation, something simpler, something he'd said when she was 16, learning to defuse her first training device in the desert heat. Stay calm, little warrior. Bombs don't know fear, but you can master yours. Black wire, she said, with absolute certainty. Cut it. 0012, 0011. Kane cut the black wire. The timer stopped at 0007. For 3 heartbeats, neither of them moved. Then the display went dark, and the mechanism gave a soft click of disengagement. Elena's legs nearly gave out. We need to secure this and get out. Kane's voice was hoarse. The building charges. Already disarmed. Caldwell's voice crackled over the radio, breathing hard. Found the detonator on Vance's body. I got him. 50 meters from the building. He's down. A pause. Wounded, but alive. Elena closed her eyes. Vance was caught. The device was safe. Her father could rest. Hartley was avenged. She'd chosen duty over revenge. And somehow she'd gotten both. They secured the nuclear device, carefully separating it from its case and placing it in a lead-lined container that Caldwell found in an adjacent room. The thing was surprisingly small, maybe 15 pounds of precisely machined plutonium and conventional explosives. Such a small object to cause so much death. Caldwell was on the radio, calling for extraction, coordinating with friendly forces that were finally close enough to respond. Webb reported that Sullivan was stable, already in a medevac helicopter heading to Malmstrom Air Force Base. The rest of their team was bruised, bleeding, exhausted, but alive, except for Hartley. Hartley was gone. As they waited for extraction, Elena stood apart from the others, looking at Vance where he lay, zip-tied and barely conscious, guarded by Caldwell. The man who'd killed her father. The traitor who'd sold American lives for money. The man who'd sent Hartley to his death. He looked small now, pathetic, all his power and menace stripped away. Kane approached quietly, standing beside her. You did good tonight. Your father would be proud. I almost killed him, almost threw away everything to get revenge. But you didn't. That's what counts. Kane put a hand on her good shoulder. Thomas told me once that the hardest battles aren't the ones where you pull the trigger. They're the ones where you choose not to, where you do the right thing even when every part of you wants to do the wrong thing. He paused. That's real strength. That's real honor. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Do you think it was worth it? All of this? The pain, the sacrifice, Hartley? Her voice caught. Do you think justice actually means anything? I think it has to. Otherwise, what are we fighting for? What did Hartley die for? The extraction helicopters arrived 30 minutes later. Blackhawks that settled in the snow like great mechanical birds. Combat medics swarmed over the team, treating wounds, checking vitals, preparing them for transport. Vance was loaded separately, bound and hooded, surrounded by armed guards who looked ready to shoot him if he so much as sneezed wrong. Elena was the last one aboard, taking one final look at the compound where so much had happened. The building sat dark and silent now, its secrets exposed, its purpose served. In a few hours, other teams would arrive to process the scene, to gather evidence, to document everything for the trials that would follow. But for her, it was over. The mission complete, the truth found, the price paid. She climbed into the helicopter and let the medics work on her shoulder while the aircraft lifted into the night sky. Through the open door, she watched Montana fall away beneath them, a patchwork of snow and darkness and distant lights. Somewhere down there, her father had died fighting for what he believed in. Somewhere down there, Hartley had made the same sacrifice. And tonight she'd honored both of them by being better than her rage, stronger than her grief. 3 weeks later, Elena stood in a hospital room at Malmstrom Air Force Base, watching Sullivan sleep. The surgery had gone well, the doctor said. Full recovery expected in 6 months. He'd been awake earlier, long enough to squeeze her hand and tell her she'd done good, that Thomas would have been proud. Now he slept, his breathing steady, his color improving. Beside his bed, a table held cards and flowers and small tokens from the team. They'd all visited, all made sure the old SEAL knew he wasn't alone. He's tougher than he looks. Elena turned to find Kane in the doorway, his arm in a sling from where a round had clipped him during the extraction. He'd refused to stay in the hospital, discharging himself after 12 hours despite doctors' protests. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "Sore, tired, still processing." "That's normal. What we went through, what you went through, it takes time to work through." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching Sullivan breathe, listening to the hospital sounds filtering in from the corridor. "I got word from the JAG office," Kane said finally. "Vance is officially charged with treason, conspiracy, murder, and about 40 other counts. They've identified at least 8 operations he compromised, maybe more." He paused. 23 American service members died because of intelligence he sold. Will he hang? Probably. If not, life in Leavenworth without possibility of parole. Kane shifted his weight. Either way, he'll never hurt anyone again. Your father can rest easy. So can Hartley. My father's dead. Hartley's dead. Nothing will bring them back. No, but you made sure their deaths weren't in vain. You exposed the rot, cut out the cancer. Kane's voice was firm. That matters, Elena. That means something. She wanted to believe him, wanted to feel like justice had been served, like the scales were somehow balanced. But all she felt was tired, empty. The rage that had driven her for 3 years was gone, burned away in that compound, and nothing had rushed in to fill the void it left. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you heal. Take some leave, decompress, figure out what you want next." Kane met her eyes. "Admiral Thompson called me yesterday. He's offering you a position as an instructor at BUD/S, teaching the next generation, passing on what your father taught you. It's good work, important work, and it's yours if you want it." Elena thought about that, thought about standing on the beach at Coronado, watching young candidates struggle through surf torture, pushing themselves beyond what they thought possible, thought about being the voice that encouraged them, the standard that measured them, the mentor who shaped them into warriors. Her father had done that, had molded Derek Vance and hundreds of others, teaching them not just how to fight, but why to fight. Most had learned the lesson. Some, like Vance, had lost their way, but that didn't invalidate the mission, didn't make the teaching less important. "I'll think about it," she said. 6 months later, Elena stood on the beach at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, watching the sunrise over the Pacific. Behind her, Hell Week was in full swing, candidates struggling through their 5th day without sleep, their bodies pushed past any reasonable limit. She could hear them in the surf, could hear the instructors shouting encouragement and criticism in equal measure. She'd accepted the position, had spent the last month learning to be an instructor, to channel her experience into lessons that might save lives. It was harder than combat in some ways, required patience she didn't always have, demanded she watch people fail without immediately helping them. But it was important, worth doing. Sullivan had visited last week, walking with a cane, but walking. He'd watched her teach, had nodded approval at her methods, had told her that Thomas would have loved seeing her like this, passing on the legacy, keeping the tradition alive. Kane had retired, finally, after 41 years of service. He'd come to Coronado for the ceremony, had received his medals and commendations with the same quiet dignity he'd shown in combat. During his speech, he'd mentioned Thomas Mercer and Cole Hartley, had told the assembled crowd about SEALs who'd saved his life and taught him what honor really meant. Vance's trial had been swift and brutal. The evidence was overwhelming, his guilt undeniable. The military tribunal sentenced him to death, a sentence he'd appealed, but that would almost certainly stand. He'd be executed within a year. His name removed from all honors, his existence erased from the proud history of the SEALs. Sometimes, late at night, Elena wondered if she'd made the right choice, if she should have let anger win, should have squeezed Vance's throat until his heart stopped. It would have been easier, cleaner, no trials, no appeals, no years of waiting for bureaucracy to deliver justice. But then she'd remember her father's words, his lessons about honor and mercy, and choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. And she knew deep in her bones that she'd done exactly what Thomas Mercer would have wanted. The real victory wasn't killing Vance, it was being better than him. A young candidate emerged from the surf, stumbling with exhaustion, her face pale with cold and fatigue. She was small, maybe 5'3", probably weighed 120 pounds soaking wet. The other instructors were watching her closely, waiting for her to quit, to ring the bell that would end her suffering. Elena walked over, stood in front of the candidate until the woman looked up. "You thinking about quitting?" "No, ma'am." "Good, because let me tell you something my father taught me." The candidate shook her head, water streaming down her face, teeth chattering. "The only easy day was yesterday, but the day you quit is the day you discover who you really are. Don't let that day be today." Elena helped the candidate to her feet. "Now get back in that water. Show them what you're made of." The candidate nodded, her eyes clearing, finding new reserves of strength from somewhere deep inside. She turned back toward the surf, back toward the pain and the cold and the impossible challenges ahead. Elena watched her go, and for the first time in 3 years felt something like peace settle over her. That evening, she drove to a small cemetery outside San Diego, where her father was buried. The headstone was simple, just his name and dates and rank: Master Chief Thomas Mercer, 1964 to 2021, 33 years of service. She knelt beside the grave, placing a new trident insignia on the stone, her own, the one she'd earned through blood and pain and the lessons he'd taught her. "Mission complete, Dad." Her voice was quiet in the evening air. "Vance is in custody. The truth is out. Justice is being served." She paused, her throat tight. "I didn't kill him. I wanted to. God knows I wanted to, but I remembered what you taught me. About honor, about being better than our enemies, about choosing mercy when we don't have to." Her voice caught. "It cost us, though. Hartley didn't make it out. He died covering our extraction. Bought us the 30 seconds we needed to get clear." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "He was a good man. Died doing his job, like you did." She touched the cold stone. "Sullivan's walking again. Retirement suits him, he says. Took up fishing. Catches more lies than fish, but he seems happy. Kane retired too. Says he's done with war. We both know that's not entirely true." She was quiet for a moment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "I'm teaching at BUD/S now, passing on what you gave me. There's a kid in my class, reminds me of myself at that age. Small, determined, won't quit no matter what." A smile touched her lips. "I'm going to make sure she makes it through, going to teach her what you taught me." She stood, touched the headstone one last time. "I miss you, Dad, every day, but I'm okay. I'm doing the work, honoring the legacy, being the SEAL you raised me to be." She walked 50 yards to a newer section of the cemetery, where a fresh headstone stood among the others. Sergeant Cole Hartley, 1989 to 2024, he gave everything. Elena knelt beside the grave, placed a challenge coin on the stone, the kind SEALs gave to brothers who'd earned their respect. "I was wrong about you too, Hartley, at first." Her voice was soft. "You died proving me wrong, proving everyone wrong. That's the kind of man you were." She touched the cold granite. "You saved Sullivan's life, bought us the time we needed. The mission succeeded because of you." A long pause, the wind rustling through nearby trees. "I'll make sure they remember. Every class I teach, I'll tell them about the sergeant who gave everything so his team could complete the mission, who proved that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what needs to be done anyway." She stood slowly. "Rest easy, brother. Mission complete." As she walked back to her car, the sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and red and gold. Beautiful, peaceful, the kind of evening that made you remember why some things were worth fighting for. worth dying for, worth living for. Elena Mercer had found her truth, had delivered her justice, and now, finally, she could begin to heal. The trident on her arm caught the last light of day, the eagle and anchor and pistol gleaming, a symbol of everything she'd overcome, everything she'd become, everything she would pass on to the next generation. Her father's legacy lived on, in her, in the candidates she trained, in the battles yet to be fought, in the warriors yet to be forged. Hartley's sacrifice wouldn't be forgotten. Sullivan's career-ending wound, Kane's decades of dedication. All of it meant something. All of it mattered. The work was never done. But for tonight, it was enough. She drove back to Coronado as stars began appearing in the darkening sky, each one a point of light in the vast darkness, each one a reminder that even in the longest night, there was always hope, always honor, always the promise of dawn. The end.